So Puritans, right? But Puritanism. I'm gonna go look up what Puritanism is real quick. I think it has something to do with religion, I'm guessing, because it says the Puritan Pilgrims. So maybe I don't even have to look it up. All right. The Puritan Pilgrims, who led the colonization of North America, believed that they stood in opposition to the dogmatism and mainstream Christianity. They refused to recognize a similar dogmatism in their rigid morality, in their hatred of the Church of England, and their Papist of Rome. What's a Papist? A Papist? P-A-P-I-S-T-S. What is that? Let's go find out. Sorry, everybody.
Well, it is colonizer language, so of course they're going to make big words.
All right, so let's see here. I got it right now. Let me get to it. So this is what it is. It's an offensive term. Oh my God, for a Roman Catholic, especially one who supports the authority of the Pope. Oh, so he's making fun of them. Awesome. Love it. That's great. I guess that's a slur that is okay to say. Maybe, I don't know. All right, now here's the other word. Since the movementism finds its theoretical center in the most powerful nation of the Western Hemisphere, despite being echoed and encouraged by similar tendencies in Europe, perhaps it is only natural that this sense of Puritan self-righteousness, this Protestant ethnic and decentralization and disunified theoretical practice would eventually hamper the social movements in the US and Canada. It would be rather simplistic, however, to reduce the current cult of disorganized activism to the sentiment inherited from the predominant religious ideology of these nations' establishment. Such an analogy, however, is only interesting in an exercise in, oh my gosh, this dude uses huge words, everybody. I'll be right back again. Sorry, everybody. It's hermeneutics. This guy likes to use words that are big. Hermeneutics. Can't say it. Which means a branch of knowledge that deals with interpretations, especially of the Bible or literal texts. All right. I think he's talking about the Puritan movement. I don't know. Seems like it. All right, cool. Where did I get that from? My fault, everybody. There it is. I would rather say, hold on, everybody. I'm so sorry, everybody. It would be rather simplistic, however, to reduce the current cult of the disorganized activism to the sentiment inherited from the predominant religious ideology of these nations established. Such an analogy, however, is only interested in an exercise of hermeneutics. It is better to simply accept that dogmatic commitment to the supposed new non-dogmatism exists rather than speculate on its possible arcane ideological origins. There are other factors, after all, some of which may provide greater explanatory depths, and many that intersects and combine generations of anti-communism, the collapse of actually existing socialism, and comparative levels of privilege enjoyed by those who live in the centers of capitalism. If anything, the analogy of Puritan Protestantism, Protestant, I can't say the damn word, but it's Protestantism actually, might be able to explain the self-righteous need for arrogantly clinging to the movementist strategy in the face of historical evidence. Better to accept only the evidence of actually existing socialism failures, its supposed totalitarianism, just as a fundamentalist accepts only the evidence that the world is irrevocably fallen and withering in sin. In this sense, the movementist horizon becomes akin to the rupture. This desire to cling on decentralized activist organizing is evident in the constant appeal to methods, politics, and scattered social movements that are enshrined by the past movementist cycles. The lingering fascination with the, I don't know what this one is, the EZLN, for example. What is the EZLN? And if I look it up, it's just going to tell me, it's going to tell me other things, I bet. It's not going to tell me what it really is. For example, it is telling there is a reason that the Zapatistas have received sainthood, while the Senderio Luminacio has not. The latter's absorbed People's War placed it firmly in the realm of failure. The former in refusing the attempt a seizure of state power were to escape any resemblance of a catastrophic communism. Yeah. But when the movement actually tries to take power and goes so far as to almost succeed, it is collapsed. The meaning of its action will be written by the ruling class intelligentsia and everyone beholden to the common sense of this class. Organizations such as I think this is the Zapatistas, the EZLN, I think it's the Zapatistas, have avoided the fate of the PCP because they do not walk in the same path of revolutionary necessity that is often tragic and brutal, where there will always be mistakes, where the problem of different class morality produces ethical confusion, whether failure is more spectacular with each heightened level of struggle. Maybe the desire to cling to movementism speaks more to the desire for political purity, free from the taint of necessity. Beneath this desire for purity, then, a fear of necessity. We do not want to confront what it would mean to address the dilemma of socialism or barbarism, because the only movements we endorse are those that have never developed far enough to treat this question as anything more than an abstraction. But this has always been the problem with movementism, a symptom of a past cycle of disorganized struggles. So that it sounds like movementism is another word for like spontaneous movements. You know, it seems like where there's no direction and stuff. Struggling where everything communist was rejecting prior as a dead end. At the very least, we can understand this previous rejection as a product of the times. Actually, existing socialism has only crumbled in decade earlier. The ruling class ideologies were working overtime to foster the belief that communism is irrelevant, and most activists live in the centers of imperialism, typically myopic when it comes to most of the world. We're largely arrogant of the new round of communist struggle that was erupting in the global peripheries. Peripheries meaning the global south, I'm assuming. Do you guys agree? When they mean global peripheries, what do you think they mean?
Global periphery.
Yeah. Global peripheries.
So I'm thinking like the surrounding sphere of influence of different empires.
Yeah. Let's find out. Let's find out real quick, if that's okay. Let's go find out. Might be a non-Marxist thing, I think. Hold on a second. But this is what I got from Google. And we all know that Google's so great. It says countries and regions that are less developed and economically disadvantaged with the world system characterized by subordinate roles in global trade and power dynamics. So that makes sense. Global periphery is the global south, is the ones that we utilize through neocolonialism and imperialism. There are peripheries because they serve our interests as the imperial core. Got it. If anybody disagrees, that's okay too. I'm good with that. Even the fact that the anti-globalization anarchists are capable of noticing an armed movement outside of the first world was surprising, though the reason they would choose to focus on the Zapatistas instead of the Sandinistas was perhaps predictable. Still, at least that stage of movementism has a sign of the times, the product of a defeated working class movement in the world's most privileged nations. The past cycle of movementist struggle declares fragmentation and disunification to be virtuous in an attempt to distance itself from fallen communism. But now we have a strange hybrid, a reclamation of communism as the abstraction that asserts itself in the midst of renewed movementism that is no different in practice from the movementism that dismissed communism as a dead end. Thus, all these attempts to reclaim communism cannot help but sublimate the sediments of anti-communist movementism. The only difference is in the jargon, in an abstract desire to save a terminology rather than a concrete practice. And yet the truth is that this abstract reclamation of communism has come too late. The movementism of today shares the same problems as the movementism of yesterday, regardless of the reclamation of communism on the part of some. Thus we find movements that are still built upon nebulous theoretical foundations, composed predominantly of people who might not be interested in even communism's name and ideologies, attempting to speak for these movements in the manner that might be perceived as alien. These movements often emerge from popular rebellions, popular movements, and those who attempt to explain their disunification will appeal to common slogans and concepts. The ideologues of the past cycles of movementism were at least humble enough to recognize this element of disarticulation. They were also theoretically consistent when they treated this disarticulation as a virtue, but refused to call it communism. Today, again, they're scared of, they're in this moment, they're scared of the word communism. Today's gray, oh my gosh, eminences. I'm going to make sure, everybody. Sorry, I keep going back and forth. I apologize.
Nothing to apologize for. By doing that, you make sure you're saying what you actually mean.
Eminence. And eminence means means frame of recognizing superiority, especially within a particular sphere of profession, a piece of raising ground. So I think it's the first one on this. All right, eminence. In their desire to reestablish the name communism as simply an abstract notion, are trying to brand a series of disorganized and limited rebellions according to their own conceptual constellation. Hence, the problem of tailism, and tailism means, we all know what tailism is. Especially, we all know that tailism, because even Lenin in one of his pieces talks about tailism. Tailism is dragging your feet behind and trying to stagnate the movements of the proletariat or any type of movement towards liberation or a revolutionary purpose. So like to try to trail behind. Hence the problem of tailism, where the attempt of popularized the name communism amounts to running behind a rebellion that rejects articulation, attempting to make it conform to a jargon that it would otherwise reject, because the fact of its disorganization makes the allergic to theoretical and practical unity. So combining theory and practice together and unity and bringing those together. Yes, because that's how we should do. We got to bring the practice with what we learned theoretically. We got to bring it to practice and bring that. Yeah, sorry, I'm repeating. Even worse is the fact that those who are attempting to reclaim communism end up catching the same plague that affects the movements they tail. The fear of necessity, and in this case, the necessity for communism. It is one thing that was one thing for an activist involved in the occupied movement to reject all the principles of past communism, to dismiss world historical revolutions. It is quite another thing that those who want to renew the traditions of communism to act in the same manner, and in the midst of these performances, worry about alienating themselves by speaking to the concrete communism. Better to just tail the masses without even wondering at the class composition of the masses that are being tailed. Better to hope that this rebellion is a revolutionary movement and that we can influence its direction with our books about hypothesis and horizons, instead of wondering about the problems of strategy and historical efficacy. We must wonder when the now mostly defunct Occupy's Wall Street journals refuse to communicate anything openly communist, and yet is being edited by known communists in the manic flurry to become part of the current round of rebellions. We even inherited the movementist fear of necessity, and in the context, it is no wonder that we are terrified of speaking anything but the name of communism. The necessity is for communists. Sectarianism. So we're going to look up sectarianism real quick, just to make sure, because that's the next word. Hold on, everybody. All right, got it. Sectarianism. I even said it correctly. Yay, look at me. I'm learning. Sorry. Where's the stick? It's effects. So just so we can get, sectarianism is an excessive attachment to identification with particular religious and political groups. So that's something we fight against, is sectarianism, I think. At least that's what Mao told me one time. Sectarianism. Oh my gosh, what is this word? The Shibboleth of sectarianism. Oh my gosh, it's another word, everybody. This guy loves me. Shibboleth. All right. The shibboleth of, let me go get it back again. This guy is utilizes very intellectual words, so bear with us. Or for me it is, at least for me. Everybody else is probably not. All right, shibboleth. A custom principle or belief distinguishing a particular class or group of people, especially a long-standing one, regarding as outmoded or no longer important. All right, interesting. Jesus, I'm already running out of the things. Come on. There we go. All right. The shibboleth of sectarianism is one of the common excuses for endorsing the most banal forms of movementist practice. After all, if a unified revolutionary movement requires by its very definition, a unified theory, then such a theory necessarily excludes other theoretical approaches. While it is true that every theoretical unified organization will experience multiple and competing political lines, it is also true that there cannot be a unified movement in which contradictory theoretical lines operate. The fantasies of movementism is that there can indeed be this type of multiplicity that, despite this fragmentation, will spontaneously produce a apocalyptic movement of unity. Hence, any talk of a necessity of the revolutionary organization unified in a disciplined by a coherent theory must be judged as heretical. By movementist ideologues, I think it's ideologues and adherents. To speak of this necessity is to be charged with pushing an exclusionary political line fostering division, quote unquote, and behaving in a sectarian manner. Amongst those committed to movementism, then it is a great sin to reject this approach and argue instead for a praxis in which revolution it has been made historically, where sectarians are similar to the heretics of the Catholic Church who were excommunicated for promoting rebel sects. Clearly, we would be remiss if we were to argue that sectarianism is not a problem. We know that there are some Marxists, and Marx's organization most of whom act as if they are still living in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, that are indeed frightfully sectarian. These tiny grouplets are incapable of participating in coalitions, dogmatically unwilling to engage in meaningful ideological line struggles, and spending most of their energy attacking other small sects that are similar to themselves. Their political praxis is little more than an act of religious self-righteousness, where they imagine themselves to be the guardians of a pure Marxist theory that must be protected for historical contamination. Do we get that a lot, everybody? We get that a lot within our groups that we engage in here on this app all the time. But the charge for sectarianism is leveled at every and any organization that dares to question the fundamental movementist doctrine. The charge for sectarianism is also meant to imply that sectarians are dogmatists, and in some cases, this is indeed correct. But the very fact that they are being charged with sectarianism because they are refusing to abide by what is intended to be hegemonic doctrine is due to their unwillingness to declare fidelity of the movementism that are sectarian simply because they are seen as sects who have broken from what those who are making the charge deem the normative terrain of anti-capitalism. Thus, the very charge of sectarianism is often generated by the dogmatic unwillingness to question social movementism. In this charge, there is also a myth that people or organizations united around particular revolutionary principles are responsible for the worst excesses of the left in the 20th century, made by people who have rarely bothered to think through revolutionary history. This is a charge that is leveled at an ideology that possesses principled clarity. Essentially, the charge is unprincipled. Those making it would prefer a lack of principles, a unwillingness to unite behind any vague standards, and rejection of theoretical struggles. Here we discover an intentional amnesia regarding what was actually significant in anti-capitalist history. Anti-revisionist movements that, in their principled refusal to peacefully coexist with capitalism, launched innumerable revolutions, some which were were world historical. Beyond this very crude and etymological, let me go look up that word, understanding of sectarianism, however, where we can understand the word sectarian by its root sect, we need to go further and examine the concept of the word that is obscured by name. Now I gotta go look back at what this word is. Other people will know what it is. I'll be right back, everybody. Etymological, which is etymological. Oh my gosh, I keep going the wrong thing. Etymological. All right. Come on. There we go. Relating to an origin or historical development of words and their meanings. Etymological. Love these words. I bet everybody else knew that, huh? Etymological. I like trying to say it too. It's fun. All right. For sectarianism means something more than the theory of and practice of a sect, just as the word hegemony means something more than a polity of hegemony. Yeah. And the way in which the charge of sectarianism is commonly used by the normative movementist left demonstrates a failure to understand world conceptual depths. A die-on-the-wall sectarian is someone who declares complete fidelity to the principles of political difference, and in this declaration accepts this principle as their primary operating ideology. The sectarian will not engage with people outside of their sect, except to treat them as enemies because they fear ideological pollution. The sectarian closes their self from history, treats their ideology as sacrosanct, and advocates cultish behavior. The sectarian imagines that their sect possesses a complete truth, and due to this great act of imagining, refuse to recognize that the lack of growth in this sect is a sign of stagnation. An organization that is sectarian will not grow in any significant manner and will remain doomed to political irrelevance due to the rigid dogmatism that can only collect those adherents that every religious cult preys upon a small minority of religious-minded individuals who are looking for easy answers, desire in excess to act in a self-righteous manner, and are generally maladjusted troglodytes to dream of leading the masses, even as they despise these masses for failing to recognize the great truth of their sect. Oh, that is so we got to be ever like open to things and ever to like not be like this where we like stagnate, because it leads to stagnation. That's why we have to be ever like wanting to move and always to like truth becomes truth, searching for truth, for the answers to things that we can't find answers to. Jesus, that's cool. But principal political differences by itself does not amount to sectarianism, though it is often treated as such by those who judge any movement of principal differences as sectarian heresy. Indeed, if endorsing a principle and politically different revolutionary ideology was the measure of sectarianism, then Marx and Engels would have to be sectarian for daring to wage an ideological line struggle against the other utopian socialist approaches that threatened to mislead the movement in the 19th century. So line struggles are somewhat important, because the The principal line always emerges and sets the revolutionary movement into a more honed in praxis. I don't know, maybe I'm just talking a lot of shit. Let us go further so as to understand how this definition is completely absurd. If we were to define the concept of sectarianism as simply principled political differences. What's up? Oh,
The word troglodyte is a slur towards indigenous people, FYI.
oh, I did not know that. What's it mean? Do you mind or not? You don't have to.
Basically means unintelligent cave dwellers.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. From now on, I'll try to use, when I see that word, if I remember, I'll say unintelligent. Thank you for letting me know. Simply principled political differences, then we would have to also accept that all anti-capitalists, even movementists, are sectarian insofar as they maintain a principled political difference with pro-capitalists. Maintaining a principled political difference is itself a necessity, part of developing a movement capable of drawing demarcating lines. And even those who would endorse movementism have to do so if they are to also maintain their anti-capitalism. Political lines, hold on, I haven't looked at the chat. I haven't looked at the chat. Inside and out. Inside and out, yep. Thank you for the education. Everybody, some people are saying thank you, Two Spirit.
Of course. I just wanted to make sure you didn't say it again without recognizing what it was used for.
Yeah. Thank you. Political lines can and must be drawn. The enemy draws them and thus understands that we are the enemy. And so we need to have the very same understanding if we are to survive. Only liberals who imagine that there really is no enemy and that everyone will get along underneath a peaceful welfare capitalism believe that the drawing of these lines is a violent act that, like violence itself, is immoral because it is the way in which the enemy behaves. They are really saying that fucking liberals, and we can see that are fucking bipartisan to everybody. Everybody deserves to exist. They're all, goddamn, damn. In this context, however, the liberal stands within the lines drawn by the enemy, by this enemy, and is thus incapable of understanding that they are endorsing a reality determined by most insidious and imminent violence. Way to call out the libs. Love it. Love it. Sorry, I got happy there. Moreover, political differences do matter because they are significant differences between political ideologies. The practice of movementism, despite some of its adherents, claims about big tent socialism, is generally based on the anarchist assessment of reality and is thus in itself a political ideology at odds with those its adherents would seek to pull into its orbit. Desperate Marxist approach are indeed quite different in how they understand the political fault lines and what needs to be done. To pretend that all of these trajectories are ultimately the same, metaphorically similar workers with identical tools attacking the identical problems, is a myth fostered by those who imagine that class struggle is hegemonous, despite their claims about the importance of heterogeneity. What is heterogeneity? I don't know what that is. And that's this.
No, it says hetero.
Yeah, heterogeneity. Let's go find out.
I don't know what the last part would mean for it.
Yeah, it's heterogeneity. Yeah, exactly. Let's just go look it up. It's heterogeneity. That's what it said. That's what the robot said. All right. That's not it. There we go. A quality or state of being diverse in character or content. Sounds like it's a good thing. Does that look like a good thing? Yeah, it is the same as hetero. Okay, thank you. God, I'm so glad I have you I have my comrades here. Thank you for being here, comrades. The movementism demands a heterogeneity that masquerades as heterogeneity, a multiplicity of trajectories, but if and only if these trajectories recognize that the overall approach is correct and do not dare to organize outside of the movementist praxis or call it into question. Here we go. The Maoist is not identical to Trotskyist. The Marxist is not identical to the anarchist. Their tools are the same. Their tools are not the same. Sorry. Their grasp of the object with which they are engaging is not precisely identical. To pretend otherwise is about as useful as pretending that Marx and Engels were the same as Proudhon and Düring, forgetting the ideological war waged against these differences so as to define the terrain of revolutionary theory. Some of those who speak now of communist hypothesis and horizons who are attempting to revise the word without critical attention to its concrete historical development as a revolutionary concept are the same people who would have us believe that these theoretical differences do not matter. Thus, the dismissal charge of sectarianism is yet another example of the fear of necessity. Ideological line struggles are indeed necessary. We must not forget that part of the communist necessity is to draw political lines of demarcations and to understand in this moment of drawing the forces of revolutions and counter-revolutions. And a further line must be drawn between those who would treat communism as a necessity, and in this treatment learn from the past historical revolutions, and those who would treat it only as a hypothesis, a horizon, an ideal possibility. So that was the end of chapter 1. That's the end of chapter 1. So like even if we do like united fronts, we still have to recognize that like the Marxist Leninists, the Marxists, even the Maoist line, even though there are some universals that we draw from each other, there are some differences that we need to understand, you know, because line struggles are necessary, I would say, you know, especially amongst the united fronts and stuff. Why are you LARPing as a human being? I don't know. All right, chapter 2, collaborations and contingencies. Despite the unwillingness to examine the riddle of necessity to speak directly to its demands, there is often a prior recognition of its fact. All of these nebulous attempts to reassert communism must accept even in their inability to make concrete assessments at the end of capitalism is necessary, though not, it must be admitted that and accepted preordained. Some attempts go so far as to summon the name of Lenin and other revolutionaries. Jordy Dean, for example, speaks of the need for Leninist style of organization, a significant and liable statement on the part of popular academic. Unfortunately, her Leninism is reduced to a form without content. A better organized occupied something that emerges spontaneously from occupied. There are times when she claims that communism cannot be deferred indefinitely, but with such a defanged Leninism, defanged as in no teeth, Leninism, that will invent processes as it spontaneously develops. The revolution can only be deferred. Her horizon remains distant. So after all this talk of horizons in ideal forms, necessity itself is recognized only insofar as it hovers as a storm over the distant horizons. After denouncing a usual aspect of communist past, according to vague, quote, anti-Stalinist narratives, to conjure the name of Lenin is like a stage trick. After speaking of revolutionary processes that will emerge spontaneously through struggle, it is strange to argue against deferring communism indefinitely, which is precisely what the practice she valorized presumes. It is difficult to know what we should make of this recognition of necessity, sometimes sublimated and sometimes ratified. Yeah. For if the concept of necessity is an assumption pushing under this new discourse of communism, or an abstract notion perceived as an ideal form when it ceases to matter, the question it demands, the historical experience it has produced, are left either misconceived or unanswered. Pushing the concept of necessity to the margins, the political mobilized, or rather undermobilized, by this discourse generates an appearance of radicalism unmoored for concrete foundations. Hence, the proliferation of various groups promoting an exciting new radicalism free from our supposedly boring revolutionary past. The Invisible Committee and its, quote, coming insurrection, end quote, the prior Tarquin group and its nebulous notion of, quote, blooming Franco-Bernard's linguistic revolution that explicitly denies historical necessity. Theory wrenched from the framework of revolutionary science can only be radical in form. Perhaps this was always the intent. Fear either supervenes fear of the necessity demanded by the actual revolutionary movement, or its oh my gosh. I wish these words would able to, when I highlight them, would say them, but it goes to the whole freaking thing. So hold on a second. Make sure. Oh my gosh. It did the thing on me. There we go. Back to there. Back to comments. Where are the comments? All right, back, everybody. Sublimate. Sorry, everybody. It's sublimate. Yeah, that's what it is. Sublimate. Beneath the appearance of radicalism, along with the concept of the necessity itself. In this context, then, we must ask why the unfolding theory, hard won through world historical revolution, is considered obtuse and alienated by the same people who never tire of inventing, quote, new and impermeable concepts. Those whose writing seems intentionally opaque, and those radicalisms appears to be little more than an intellectual exercise. What should those of us who dare fidelity to the revolutionary communism that emerged from the experience of class struggle care for a theory that primarily locates its radicalism on the level of appearances, that is obscured and abstract, that properly belongs at an academic conference rather than in the streets and countryside? That's a question mark, because I didn't say this question. For these theoretical abstractions are indeed only popular amongst first developing world academics and delineates students and would-be intellectuals, anarchists from middle class suburbs searching for words and ideas to guarantee a revolutionary ideology. At the margins and in the peripheries, these theories have gained very little credence. These contemporary manifestos, greeted with excitement by a small population of radicals at the centuries of of capitalism are not as new as their champions believe. The working class movement and the revolutionary struggle of the masses has experienced innumerable and similar attempts to revise revolutionary theory. Eugene Düring, for example, attempted to provide an alternative and prettier theory to the supposed boringness of communist ideology. And though the theoretical categories he used might now seem hackneyed, this is only because we have the privilege of historical perspectives. Düring was, in fact, drawing upon the conceptual constellation that a late 19th century intellectual would have understood and found exciting. The constellation that had little to do with the concrete experience of the European proletariat of that period. Düring's influence was significant enough amongst intellectuals flirting with socialism that other predominant thinkers treated him as an equal prominent representative of socialism. Nietzsche's various and confused attacks on socialism come mainly from his reading of Düring. There is no evidence of Nietzsche's, it's Nietzsche, ever read Marx or Engels. Herzl's Zionism, along with Dohr's affairs, was partially influenced by the assumption that socialism was anti-Semitic due to an understanding of socialism derived from Düring, who was also an anti-Semite. Jesus. But now we only know Düring because Engels took the time to thoroughly destroy his theoretical doctrine, and in doing so proved the strength of what Düring took to be out of step with intellectual fashion. To Düring we can add Guy Debord and situationism of theory. Jesus, I never heard of situationism. What is situationism? It's a fun one. Hold on. These intellectual words, I love them, kind of. All right. Okay, so it is a psychological theory that behavior is determined more by immediate situations than the stable person traits. Huh. All right, that's a little brief thing. That's interesting. Situationalism. That's a good one. Where'd it go? There it is. Just making sure. Matters little to even more the academic. Okay. Here we go. And the accurate to claim that situationalism matters little to even most academic leftists these days. He is worth mentioning because so many of these new attempts at reclaiming communism often speaks his name. There are other names and other attempts, and those that are not preserved in academic or publishing institutions we're forgetting. By the end of the 1980s, when the communism they sought to revise was supposedly defeated, more than a critical reflection of supposedly, quote, orthodox communism. These eclectic or overly academic communisms are the symptom of a larger problem, an inability to overcome normative ideologies even in the midst of recognizing its existence. At the centers of capitalism, capitalist hegemony is generally complete. We have been trained since birth to accept the ruling ideas of ruling class as common sense. Although we have been successful in stepping outside of the quote-unquote common sense in order to recognize the need to end capitalism, we are often incapable of apprehending the meaning of this necessity due to how we have been taught to perceive the world. We have been taught failure. We have been educated to believe precisely what a class ideology that is concerned with preserving the current state of affair claims about the history of class struggle. So when we step outside of the end of the history narrative, it is easier to gravitate towards this supposedly critical strain of communism, dismiss what this strain name of orthodoxy, according to the standards of capitalist propaganda, and embracing new communist ventures. This is what the Invisible Committee is and what its predecessors, the Taekwon Group, it's TIQQUN Group, was. This is Bernard's uprising, unintentionally satirical with the imaginary revolution. This is what all of these similar reclamations of communism, from endnotes to theorocommunistia, that must be a different language, are and can ever be an attempt to profess communism while simultaneously accepting the end of history narrative. Basically, the end of history narrative saying that capitalism is the end of history. This is why the vast majority of these supposed reclamations of communism refuse to speak of the vital revolutionary struggles that have emerged in the peripheries of the global imperialism. This is why there is rarely any mention of people's wars. In such a context, the only solution is to tell popular rebellions, and in this tailing refuse to provide active and unified leadership. The theoretical constellation might differ, but the practice remains the same. Movementism, with its presumptions that the disorganization of social movements is an unqualified virtue. To intervene in these spaces and attempt to provide leadership is treated as an act of violence. If an organization of a Leninist style is indeed needed, then we are led to believe that it must be invent itself overnight, spontaneously emerging from the next rebellion. But in this context, there are several questions worth asking. Why are there so many new manifestos aimed at delinking from communist past? And what do they accomplish? Why do academics have an obsession with a Blake theory and resonates primarily with these same academics and activist intellectuals? What theoretical constellations is being dismissed as old-fashioned, boring, or orthodox? And just what does it mean to reclaim the concept of necessity as something that is neither supplemented nor reified? Again, it is worth pointing out that these are questions that are mainly pertinent at the centers of capitalism, where we lost our way a long time ago. We also need to ask the most important question that haunts all of these questions, which is a question of necessity. How do we find our way back to the road of communist revolution? For the moment, however, let us put aside this last question to focus on the I gotta do the thing. Hey, I did it first time. The haunting itself. The haunted past. So, what do we make? Oh, I gotta look at the time. There we go. So, what do we make of every new manifesto that attempts to delink communism from its revolutionary past? At the very least, we should begin to recognize that many of these reassertions of communism are not totally rejections of history. Significant names of movements are occasionally noted, and this is a partial victory. Dean conjured a ghost of Lenin. Bodhi appeals to the scepter of Mao. The gap between name and concept is occasionally bridged. Sometimes there is a recognition that certain elements of history are ours to reclaim. Badiou, it's Badiou, who once defined himself as a Maoist against intellectual fashion, remains unwilling to surrender historical memories of capitalist ideology. He goes so far as to challenge the discourse of totalitarianism that identifies Stalin with Schmittler. In some of these cases, then, there is a liable attempt and an ideological struggle to return to variety of names to what is considered acceptable discourse even amongst left-wing academia. And in 2007, Slovak Zazik, Sebastian Bungend, and Status, these are hard names, Kovalexiak, can't say it, initiated the opening Slavo of his reclamation by releasing the collections Lenin Reloaded as an attempt to make Lenin palatable for academics and intellectuals at the centers of capitalism. Before this reassertion of communism as a name and under the auspices of a simplified Marxism or socialism, it was inappropriate to speak of Lenin, let alone Mao or Stalin, unless we were speaking of the betrayal of some vague socialist ideal. Indeed, some Trotskyists and post-Trotskyists who were the primary authorities of Marxism in first world academia would only speak of Lenin outside of academic settings. They were obviously content with accepting the discourse that compares Stalin to Schmittler due to their obsession with the imaginary Stalinism, just as they were happy to ban the name of Mao for acceptable discourse. Thus, we should at least recognize the significance of this reclamation. Fucking Trotskys. Fucking Trots. And yet, the rearticulation of communism, regardless of the names that are often mobilized, still persists in a delinking of communism from its revolutionary past. Although such a delinking appears to be liable, these manifestos resonate with those raised in the so-called, quote, end of history, where anti-communist ideology is ascendant. Moreover, many of these reclamations still refuse to speak those banned names since they remained convinced of their betrayal. All attempts to alienate ourselves from our revolutionary history can be presented as pragmatic and critical. The desire to close those historical doors through which the ghost of past revolution emerge has been the tactical practice of radical anti-capitalists at the centers of global capitalism for a long time, crystallizing after the collapse of actually existing socialism. Even before this collapse, it was often the hallmark of supposedly critical Marxism in the first world, perhaps due to the influence of Trotskyism. Goddamn Trots. To denounce every real world socialism as Stalinist, authoritarian, totalitarian, since the rectification of anti-communist triumphalism and the denunciation has achieved hegemony. It is the position to which would-be Marxist academics gravitate and accept as common sense on unquestioned dogma. Hence, we are presented with a constellation of attempts to reboot communism by calling in something different, by making its past either taboo or meaningless, by resorting to self-defeating philosophies where the idea of, quote, true communism is eternally conjured in order to dismiss past revolutions due to their inability to demonstrate fidelity in this pure idea. So it's denying historical materialism. It's denying the universalities that came out of these revolutions. It's also denying their successes and also taking the criticisms of their failures to be able to take those in and to do better this time. So they're just denying things and trying to reinvent things, which is basically revisionism. And of course, it's a Trotskyist line, it looks like. Beneath these attempts to alienate communism from its past, we occasionally discover movements of Platonic idealism. Out there somewhere is the idea of true communism upon which we must reflect in order to reach a distant horizons of human freedom. But the ghost of history cannot be exorcised. Attempting to ignore them by choosing to speak of communism without reference to these shades will remain haunted. Most often, such a discourse will presuppose as a default principle that this haunting means precisely what the anti-communist discourse claims to mean. Occasionally, it will seek a different path, skipping over the entire history of revolutionary communist experience and pretending that utopian theories and movements alienated, demystified idealists are the only worthwhile precedents for communism. In the end, the attempt to delink from our revolutionary past, treating it as a prison from which we must escape, does violence to history. To claim that we must unshackle ourselves from this past and seek a new communist horizon is to denounce everything for which revolutionaries have fought and died. These ghosts can teach us something, both in their successes, like I said, and failures. And we learn nothing by dismissing them as unwelcome poltergeists. And yet, the obsession to discover a new approach to communism that is somehow free from the past, as if we can ever escape this past that weighs upon us, quote, like a nightmare, end quote, prides itself in its supposed creativity and crucial depths. We must ask, however, what is creative about trying to reboot a tradition by deleting its world history moments? This is much like the cliche of reinventing the wheel. It might indeed be created to make a triangular or octagon wheel, but it is not a very meaningful creativity. And just what precisely is critical about building a communism by repeating the common sense anti-communist ideology about past socialism? It is very easy to believe we are being critical by challenging the supposed dogmas of communism when in point of fact, we are simply repeating whatever capitalist textbooks has been reclaimed about communism for decades. The creativity and criticism of academic theory has always been rather banal. The jargon might seem exciting and supposed newness of neologism. Logism. I have no idea what that word means. So I'm going to go look it up. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. Neologism. New words. I'll probably forget all these dang words, to be honest. Wrong one. All right. So, newly coined word or expression. A coined or used of a new word. Okay. So basically, a new expression of something. Okay. That's what it sounds like. All right. Do. Come on. Do what I want you to do. All right. And clever frameworks might indeed be challenged, but there really hasn't been anything thoroughly creative and critical that has emerged from the ranks of the academic speculations for a long time. There are innumerable obscurantism-y terroristy, which is they have it in a different language, to cite the term Foucault once applied to Derrida, clever theorists who achieved the illusion of critical creativity by a framework defined by obscurantist jargon, but nothing that has provided a new concrete analysis of a concrete situation. nothing capable of changing the world. The exciting theory, the creative theory, the theory capable of thoroughly critiquing the world has only ever emerged from revolutionary movements. But since this has an insight of Marx and the tradition of Marxism, it is only natural that non or anti-Marxist academics would dismiss the axiom and lose themselves in the obsession to produce new theories and new manifestos, none of which will ever matter to the masses, which is to say, will never be capable of doing what this kind of manifesto claims it can do. In the first place, change the course of history. Thus, we should have little patience for those who complain about the supposed poverty of thought amongst the ranks of today's anti-revisionist communisms. This constant complaining about the so-called dogmatic fidelity to feature such as Mao or Lenin or even Stalin, this fear and trembling caused by those who even dare to unfold the failing People's War in Peru, is a symptom of falsely critical creativity. It is a bit like telling physicists that they are not critical or creative for daring to take the general theory of relativity seriously, thus proposing that it would be better just to pretend that Einstein and all of the trouble of his theory caused did not exist. Most importantly, such a complaint demonstrates a very uncreativity and uncritical fidelity to anti-communist ideology. We really must ask, what is so critical about accepting the fixed interpretations of the world that we've been socialized into accepting since birth? It is rather, what is this? Asinine to complain about dogmatism and orthodoxy. If one adheres to the height of dogmatic orthodoxy, the bourgeoisie way of seeing the world, embracing the risk of sounding academically unfashionable, I want to suggest that there can be no creativity or critical manifestos that exist outside the bounds of a concrete, a revolutionary understanding of necessity. Especially, and in this context, the only worthwhile manifestos are those that are capable of producing an understanding of reality as seen from below. And one of the manifestos, one of the things I would say is yours, Two Spirit. Your manifesto calls to action. Your manifesto looks at the world critically and helps people to create a sense of consciousness surrounding indigenous theory, practices, and also decolonization. I would say one of your manifestos does that. The ones that you did yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I thank you for that.
Yeah, because it's not a revisionist thing. If anything, you add a greater depth to even like the Red Nation. You know what I mean? You both complement each other.
That was my goal. That's why I say people should read Red Nation and also read mine.
Yeah. Even seen, okay, and I think that, okay, hold on, let's get this nice. Let me reread this sentence. Embracing the risk of sounding academically unfashionable, I want to suggest that there can be no creative or critical manifestos that exist outside of the bounds of a concrete revolutionary understanding of necessity. Because that's the thing that you realize, that communist necessity is needed. And a decolonial communism. Specifically, and in this context, the only worthwhile manifestos are those that are capable of producing an understanding of reality as seen from below. Here we go. When seen from below or seen from above, the same reality is often viewed very differently. Two different points of views, which generate two different understandings, and consequently two different kinds of feelings and reactions. The first revolutionary act is class struggle is to recognize, understand, and seize the world from below. We must not fall into the trap that is believing that the bourgeoisie, hallucinations from above are truthful realities. The current world situation is a good example of this double standard, this two-faced way of seeing things. Seen from above, everything is prosperity, enrichment, wealth, democracy. Seen from below is its crisis, corruption, war, and misery. None of these new academic manifestos, even when they veil themselves as Marxists, are capable of representing the world from below. They are always above, filtering down from the heights of academic speculation, divorced of revolutionary struggles. And that's one of the positions of a Maoist, is that we want to create what we want to create is organic intellectuals from the pools of the masses. That's what we want to do as a Maoist position. I don't know if that's a Marxist-Leninist position, but I know that's a Maoist position, to create leadership, to create intellectuals, proletarian intellectuals from the masses themselves. That's one thing that I love about when Kant Union Rupture talked about those things. Concerning with the distant horizons and not the brutal necessity that demands revolution, we are constantly looking towards a future that is unchanged from the past. Real quick, I'm gonna look at the things real quick. Oh, nice soup. Yeah, that shit lib live. Yeah, that was shitty. You're right. All right, I'm just looking back real quick. All right, here we must recall Walter Benjamin's warnings. I got warnings in Thesis of Philosophy of History. For though he was also an estranged academic, he was aware of the dangers of movements premised solely on a future unshackled from its past, where he claims that this focus on the utopian horizon results in the passing of, quote, the true picture of the past, end quote, and that, quote, every image of the past that is not recognized by the present as one of its own concerns threatens to disappear irretrievably, end quote. All this talk of new horizons must be abandoned if we cannot honestly engage with the image of our past and how it affects the present, the horizons that are alienated from the world of below, that do not emerge as goals produced by the past struggles of the wretched of the earth, should be treated as idle speculation. So, all right. And I think it's 15 minutes till. Next is contingency, but let's see here. Let me see here. 42. I think it's too long. Yeah, it's too long. Way too long. Well, let's say 42. Yeah, it's 6 pages. I don't think I read 6 pages in 15 minutes. Plus, that's a lot. We've read a lot. And there's a lot to go for. It's like they're denying historical materialism. And it's like they're denying universalities that form out of successful revolutions. You know what I mean? Does anybody have anything they would like? Yeah, we're going to stop on page 42 and contingencies. Yeah, we're stopping there. It seems like a lot of a denial of like the past and like people trying to revamp an ideology that is based in universalities and concrete observation of what is required. In the case of what is there to be done and how to form vanguard parties and how to form coalitions, united fronts. Like we need to look at the past in order to be able to, oh, your screen frozen? To be able to understand what we need to do now and to have concrete analysis of like even the past within the United States. What's up, Doodley?
Oh, I was just coming up to say that this sounds like something that if Lenin was like able to come to this age, it sounds like something he would write.
Yeah. So what was the other one we read? We read on Forgot the one before this one.
I think that was the second volume of the Red Deal.
No, in this book. This is the feminist necessity. So like the thing is I think people are also like in this book he's talking about how people try to revamp something that is already historically known to work, you know, adjust it to our material conditions. It seems like they're talking about people trying to apply things what we call mechanically instead of flowing, ebbing and flowing and flexibility, you know? Does anybody else have anything to say? Yeah, continuity and rupture. Benny, anything you would like to say?
No, I'm good.
Yeah? Anything stand up to you? If not, that's fine too. Anything stand up to you or did anything, nothing? All right, you good. Anything for you, Two Spirit? Anything?
I mean, the only thing that got me was that they did use the thing that goes referring to indigenous people as a slur, but it's also ableist too. So because it actually refers to an underlined way of saying the I word.
Yeah,
and not talking about like saying the I word for like indigenous people, but for like people with disabilities. I word.
Yeah. And and like now I know that now I can do better and stuff like that.
Yeah, that is a critique I will give this book. It did associate honest ignorance with willful ignorance by using that word, and also kind of brought harm to the indigenous community.
Yeah,
that's the only critique I'll have.
I don't know what race or what ethnicity this author is. I think he might be a person of color, but that still doesn't give him the validity.
I was about to say.
You know, but
anything
else that you guys picked up besides that one?
That was my only critique.
Okay. Fair enough. Good critique.
No.
What's up, Sebastian? What would you like to say?
Hey, I
you guys speak a little bit louder.
I see the I'll put my
You're good now.
My closer.
Yeah.
I see the necessity of doing like a little recount of the things that has happened to advance. We have to, as you said, go back to go. I would say, go back to go forward. In this case, doing a little recount of all of the things that has happened. I think the fall of the USSR and the fall of
Mao.
The revisionist start of China is a good start, and from there going forward to the current time into what has happened from then. In the case of international scene, and in the case of a national scene, what has happened in the United States with I think that has with the recounting the what has happened with the Maoist movements of the communist movements in the United States to today and the conditions. I think that's a good start for going on.
Also, the denial of people's wars that are happening in the periphery right now. This book mentions all the Maoist movements that are happening now in like India, in like oh my gosh, I always mess this up. The Philippines and other places in the peripheries. It talks about how the periphery is constantly doing revolutions and liberation processes, and the denial of those things that are happening, and the mere fact that the bourgeoisie society keeps us from this acknowledgement that like the peripheries, we're going to call them the colonies, you know, the purposely underdeveloped nations are constantly in a people's war. You know what I mean? So the people's war, we should identify, we should look at the peripheries and even observe those too scientifically, and what they're doing correct, and what you might have, you know, some kind of critiques, without being, of course, you know, like xenophobic or racist and things, because everything is up for critique. It's just how you do the critiques. So like even like in the Pure Core, we're not even privy to these other movements that are happening constantly in the global South. You know, because of their conditions, they have worsening conditions than we do. You know, so like even when they talked about that too. Sorry,
I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why he has give after the fall of the Soviet Union and the fall of China. I think I don't know why it has given place into this this kind of so-called ML groups that and you know the like the this kind of groups that are called this are so-called Marxist-Leninist, and they got like this kind of revisionist stand with they mostly got into bourgeois politics and
yeah,
and got into on this kind of you know, that like the Communist Party of Russia, the Russian Federation, or the so-called Hokusai
USA.
groups, or these groups that has gone here in TikTok. I think in real life they don't have that big presence, but they exist. This kind of left groups. So it has like also all of these Trotskyist groups that are always minorities and never get like to a majority.
yeah.
Of union, or always stay at the side.
Yeah. And like I think like what he did mention is that like these were successful revolutions because they did change the conditions, but because of right deviations such as Khrushchev, such as Deng, the right deviations put communism in retreat. And you know what? If we're talking about people's protracted war, retreat is a valid thing to consolidate and to come on stronger next time. So I think that, yeah, during those times he wrote this book, it was communism in retreat in a sense. And now I feel like revolution is all over the place. I don't know if it's because I'm more like attuned to it, because I'm reading a lot more about it and I'm seeing them than before, or like it feels like that communism is coming out of retreat and into the mode of defensiveness and to overthrow. So it feels like it's right there a bit.
I always put these two, and not wanting to be repetitive. After the USSR, after Mao's China. But you saw in the we saw it in the no we, because I wasn't born yet in that era. On the 70s.
Yeah.
On the 70s, this kind of short bloom of Maoist groups, and and they lead and the I think the decay of these groups shortly
Yeah.
on the 70s, and in the bloom of this kind of Euro communists and all of these groups. After the Sino-Soviet split and the Sino-Albanian split, the bloom of these groups that I have described it before. And
There-
I think at some point on the 90s, at some point of the 90s, it got like a little of deflation. Like it deflated completely with the fall of the USSR. I don't know how did it went on the 2000s to right now,
Yeah.
but
Well, we can ask the question if that's okay. Sebastian, you know the Red Nation is a Marxist-Leninist movement?
no, I didn't know.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that that them themselves being utilizing praxis and utilizing their conditions, they're definitely not using revisionist tactics at all. I think they're pretty principled. As far as what I've read and what I know about them, that's probably a Marxist-Leninist group that I would say is pretty principled in their line. I just hope that when it comes to advancement later on, that they just advance. But right now, they're right where they're at. They're principled. Just my observation, principled based on the books that I've read and what I've seen through their social media stuff and everything, and listening to other people talk about them and stuff like that. Like last night, freaking Sean, she came on and said that she actually met with some of the Red Nation people and they're doing the work. And I think that's the most important thing, is they're doing the work and they're principled, I would say. Marxist-Leninist principle. Even as a Maoist, I'm saying that, you know?
Now that I think about maybe the war on Ukraine and the October 7 of events, maybe got what is the term that I'm going to use? I'm searching it. Maybe sharped a little bit of the contradictions worldwide, and with I think with the election of Trump and the sudden wave of right wing movements and neo-fascist movement on neo-Nazis movement on the world, just got a lot of got a high, let's put it like a high wave of the contradictions, correct contradictions on worldwide and in each country.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not.
You want to say, Billy?
Yeah. Okay. So yes, to what you were saying about principled liberation. Yeah, I would say that it's more important to keep principle of liberation rather than choosing what name it is, because a principled line for liberation is what the goal is, and if that is the goal, then the name of it
The masses will choose.
matters little.
If I'm a Maoist, right, the masses will choose the correct line at the end of the day that brings their liberation to fruition. And that's why, as
Yes,
revolutionary, even reading as a Maoist this book, it still tells me that I need to be a revolutionary scientist and be flowing that Maoism might not rupture in the United States. It might be something else. But if it's principled and it's drawing the attention to actually do the thing and go through it thoroughly and concretely, then yes, that's the principal line, and the masses will choose the line.
Yeah. Principle of liberation comes first, and the name matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Hold on a second. Let me do something real quick. All right. Does anybody else have anything? Two Spirit, do you have anything to say?
No, I was just wondering that specific question if Sebastian, you considered Red Nation revisionary. So that's all.
I don't know their line. Their line. I haven't read. I haven't read about them or about their line. Oh, sorry. Or what they think. So I wouldn't know how to respond to that.
What you're saying is you need the observance and analysis and stuff for yourself. They got a website. It's called rednation.org. Anybody is welcome. I think everybody, including me, I need to still do it. I forgot. Needs to go ahead and investigate that website, and see how we can all contribute. I know you're in Colombia though, right? Sebastian.
Yeah, that's why I am not like so acquainted to familiarized to this kind of movements, this kind of things about Red Nation or the new African nation or New Africa or these things.
Yeah.
So I am kind of discovering, learning.
And that's the whole point, is to discover and investigate and discover things, you know? That's what's great about this, you know? But if no one has anything else to say, I'm going to go ahead and feed Rufus and stuff like that. I do hope everybody has a good weekend. I'll probably see everybody around. Lynn put in the org. If everybody was curious and trying to investigate Red Nation, there it is, the rednation.org. Very good website. I think it's pertinent. I think it should be a centerpiece. As Mal said, it should be the center of gravity, in my opinion. Anyways, I wish you all the best. Love you all.